Hello, and welcome to On Second Thought, a bonus series from And the Runner-Up Is. On May 16th, 2018, I released the episode of And the Runner-Up Is on the 2008 Best Picture race, where Andrew Carden and I discussed the curious case of Benjamin Button as the runner-up that lost Best Picture to Slumdog Millionaire. But on second thought, what if the runner-up was really Milk?
Below. It's down on the street and it's trying hard to force us to flow.
Hello, and welcome back to On Second Thought, a bonus series from And the Runner-Up Is, where we discuss another Best Picture nominee that I did not cover on the regular show. I'm your host, Kevin Jacobson, and today I have two fabulous guests with me to discuss Milk. First off, this guy is a writer at Gold Derby who you heard talking with me about La La Land and the Oscar year of 2016, and then Network and the Oscar year of 1976. He also joined me for another episode of On Second Thought about The Big Short. Please welcome back Charlie Bright.
My pleasure.
All right. And that person you hear cheering is an author, a writer, a film critic, an icon who you heard talking with me about Dog Day Afternoon and the Oscar year of 1975. Please welcome back to the show, Thelma Adams.
Yay!
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so supportive of each other already. This is going to be fun.
Already?
Yeah.
You know, sisterhood.
Yes, exactly. So in that spirit, we will be discussing Milk. So let's get into a quick summary of the film. It tells the story of the last 9 years of Harvey Milk's life. Harvey Milk made history in the 1970s as the first openly gay elected official in California. He was elected to the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, and the film tells the story of him becoming involved in the local gay community in San Francisco, organizing for gay rights, dealing with anti-gay politicians and public figures, and also a fellow member of the Board of Supervisors, Dan White, while trying to basically empower and inspire and make a difference for the gay community. So the film was directed by Gus Van Sant and written by Dustin Lance Black. It stars Sean Penn as Harvey Milk, James Franco as his lover Scott, Diego Luna as another lover, Jack, Emile Hirsch, Alison Pill, Victor Garber, Dennis O'Hare, Steven Spinella, and Josh Brolin as Dan White. So Milk made $31 million at the U.S. box office, was nominated for 8 Academy Awards, winning 2, but not Best Picture. Okay, so Milk. Let's start first with Charlie and your experience with Milk, then and now.
Well, this movie piqued my interest as soon as it was announced. I actually have a bit of a personal connection to Harvey Milk. When I was a young spry queen of about 15, my mom and I decided to go around the original DC neighborhood, which is DuPont Circle. And we went into the landmark, the big bookstore they had, Lambda Rising, which is unfortunately since closed. And after I was looking around for a little while, I found my mom, and she was reading a book called The Gay 100. And she was reading the chapter about Harvey Milk, and she had this very surprised expression on her face. And after she told me who Harvey Milk was and what had happened to him, she was saying that her mother, my grandmother, I called her Nana, when that happened and she saw that on the news, Nana said, "Oh my God, I think that's my friend Harvey from high school." And sure enough, when she was reading the chapter on Harvey Milk, it said that he had graduated from Bayshore High School in Long Island in 1947, which was exactly when and where my grandmother went. So I had always been very interested in Harvey Milk, the story of his life, especially what happened to him, and the lack of action, at least on the state's part, of what happened to him after his death. And so when I first heard that they were going to make this movie, I was interested. When I heard Sean Penn was going to play Harvey Milk, I was not very excited.
Mm-hmm.
I was just like, oh no, I just thought Sean Penn was going to make it, so serious and everything. But when I saw the movie, not only did I love the movie, but Penn's performance was magnificent. I saw something in Penn that I had never seen in him before, which was like completely pure, unadulterated joy.
Yeah.
I thought that he captured Harvey brilliantly as a sarcastic Jew from Nassau County, New York, which is exactly what he was. And I absolutely thought it was great. I thought all aspects of it were fantastic. Seeing it again just recently, I thought that the whole cast was fantastic. I thought Brolin was really good as Dan White. I know he gets some flack now for him being the supporting actor nomination for the movie. And even though I still would have nominated someone like James Franco or Emile Hirsch before him, his performance as Dan White is still really good. And Gus Van Sant's direction also is it's really, really something to see how he seamlessly blends the archival footage of the film with the actual shots that they did. And I thought that was just great.
Excellent. And how about you, Thelma?
Boy, that is an act to follow there.
Yeah, do you have a personal connection?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
But it's a different kind of connection.
Excellent.
When this was going on in the 70s, I ended up graduating from high school in 76 and was in Berkeley across the bay from 76 through the time that this happened. So I was living in San Francisco and Berkeley at the time. And it's kind of a flashback to the past for me. I would say that watching it again, I was a little less enamored of it. Obviously, it is a great story. We had seen the documentary previously, and that was very strong. But as we know in American movies, until you make a biopic, it's kind of like people don't necessarily go back to the documentary. So what was radical in 2008, 2009 was this story about an American politician that people really didn't know. Now looking at it through our contemporary lens, I struggle because I see Sean Penn throughout. I can't just see Harvey Milk. I see Sean Penn, kind of crazy activist, batterer. I think I've been kind of consumed by these issues. I look at Emile Hirsch and I don't see cute little guy actor. I'm like, his career has been tainted. It's an interesting lens for me. It's a little bit. I think I'm much more critical of it now than I was when I first saw it. And I would agree also that Josh Brolin acts the hell out of that role as Dan White. The problem there is that it's an underwritten role. Mm-hmm. And we don't really, as someone said in The Guardian, I think very wisely, it's that maybe you can't suggest a movie for Gus Van Sant, but you kind of want there to be more of who Dan White was and the tension between Harvey Milk and Dan White to play out. There's like so much going on throughout the movie and you know where it's going, but a little bit more Dan White would have gone a long way, and maybe a little less Emile Hirsch, a little less James Franco, a little less Diego Luna.
I see what you're saying with that, and the documentary you were talking about, The Times of Harvey Milk, actually does delve into a lot with Dan White. kind of in the aftermath of Harvey's murder in a way that I found really interesting, that I think Josh Brolin would have had good material to kind of work with there.
Just to respond, Brolin is really an underappreciated actor. Like, he really is always good. And if you want an off the beaten track Josh Brolin movie, go watch him as Debbia, the Lost Oliver Stone movie.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, it's funny that I'm having the two of you on for this because, you know, films like Network and Dog Day Afternoon, I feel like they have such like a propulsive energy to them, and it feels like no scenes are really out of place, and you're always very present, very focused. And for me, that's actually kind of how I felt watching Milk again. You know, it's over 2 hours, but I think it really zips by, and it has a really contagious energy to it where you do want to believe in Harvey Milk's message, and you want to be marching in the streets with him, and the whole mantra of giving people hope in a community that can often feel very hopeless, particularly at this time in history with the anti-gay sentiment all around. It's such a clear and distinct message, I think, throughout the film, and it never feels particularly like cloying. You know, it can be tricky to sort of pull that off when you have a film about an inspiring figure to not go a bit heavy-handed with it. And there are emotional moments in the film that are very moving, which for me is honestly any time that Harvey just gets behind a microphone and he's talking to his community. But I did want to delve a little more into the Sean Penn performance, since it sounds like we're kind of all of different opinions on what he's giving with this film. I think in many ways that he does kind of embody the character in many scenes, but I do understand what you're saying, Thelma, as far as kind of some of the tics that I can kind of sense at times, and his public persona can sometimes be a bit too distracting overall. But Charlie, did you have any additional thoughts on kind of the performance he's giving here?
Not really. I just really thought as I said, I really thought he captured Milk at his core. The core characteristics of him, you know, being this very affable, sometimes temperamental, but very affable and jovial, but also a cunning person as well. And I really think he just brought that to life beautifully, to the point where, and I think it's one of those things where it's always tough when you're playing a real life person who we have, audio recordings and videotape of, because there's always the question of whether or not are you going to try to do an impersonation of them, are you going to bring your own thing to it? And I think that Penn rides that line pretty well. He still sounds like Sean Penn, but he does give his voice certain affectations that Harvey Milk's voice had. You know, the accent, his eccentricities, the way he was, very gregarious in public sometimes. I really enjoyed it.
It's interesting. I'm just kind of battling this two sides of what I felt when I first saw it and what I feel now about Sean Penn. So I do feel, and it's interesting that I have a very different emotional feeling than what I perceived you had. But I do. There's so many tics going on, and when he gets in front of a microphone and you watch his hands, it's like he's really, there's something. It's almost like baton twirling. Like, to me, there's something that I see that's a little bit too him trying too hard.
That is calculated.
But
yeah.
It's interesting because I took this quote that stuck with me. It was David Denby in The New Yorker, and he said at the time, "Is there an actor in Hollywood braver than Sean Penn?" And I feel like, why isn't there a gay actor playing that role?
Yeah.
I don't want to say, I don't want to be so limited, that only a gay actor can play this or only an Asian actor can play that. But still, there's this feeling among that when I see Denby's quote, it's like, oh, how brave Sean Penn is for playing a gay man and kissing James Franco. There's something about it.
Who wouldn't?
What? Who wouldn't kiss James Franco?
Exactly.
I mean, at that time.
You know what? I hate to say it. I am stepping out of that one.
All right, more for me.
More for you, baby. More for you. Which
boy.
There's some things. It's interesting talking to the two of you because there are these things that bothered me watching it now. Like watching the sex scene that was done, like, through a doorway.
Yes,
in
that is
the
true.
dark.
Mhm.
And I felt like there were ways in which they, and in the end, maybe you can say that in order to get the larger message of hopey changey, that it's worth it. And I'm listening to that argument. I just feel a little bit like, yeah, the kiss. Who wouldn't kiss James Franco? Who wouldn't kiss Diego Luna? But the way that Gus Van Sant kind of pushes the sex scene into the closet, almost. I honestly I don't know where to take that. It doesn't feel brave to me.
Right. Yeah, I will agree on that, on seeing it a second time, is that it does feel a little bit just aimed a lot more towards a straight audience in terms of making them as comfortable as possible. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know what you mean.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what it's about, and maybe that's one of the reasons it went all the way to the Oscars.
I'm sure that was a major part of it, is the larger majority straight white men in the Academy feeling more comfortable with the way it's approached, kind of like little hints, but not really going all the way, which is actually something that was my major criticism, now that you're mentioning it, with the film, is that I do feel like it does really kind of skirt the truth in terms of just like going there in terms of like any sort of danger in terms of like sex or darkness or anything like that. Like, it is a very hopeful and almost like a PG-13 kind of film, when I feel like the truth is a little bit darker.
See, I actually like the way the sex scenes were done, because to me, and I guess this is just me, from a film perspective, but that just felt like, something Gus Van Sant would do. Mm-hmm. The way he would structure that, so that to me it didn't bother me. And also for me, sometimes if it were any more, sometimes it might feel a little gratuitous, at least from my perspective. But I'm actually on the same page with you, Thelma, about this whole Sean Penn being brave for doing this. No, that doesn't make him brave. I do think, though, it should be noted, this was a film that had an all-queer setup. You have a gay writer, Dustin Lance Black, gay director, Gus Van Sant, and the two producers, Dan Jakes and Bruce Cohen, are also openly gay men. So I thought that was, I think that was a big, I think that was a big thing for itself on its own.
Yeah, but it is interesting that a lot of the actors playing gay characters are, in fact, straight. And so there is something to the idea of like, well, we're not quite at that point where we can just go completely authentic with it, Apparently
there was another, and I think that it is important that Jenks Cohen, this was a film, I don't know what they had done before, but after this film and after they walked this film, through 8 Academy nominations and 2 wins, it really empowered them within Hollywood. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of...
I was just saying, they had produced American Beauty, so they were
right.
Oscar
they were already there. They were already there. You're okay. I wasn't aware of that. I will say that they both have had very strong presences in Hollywood, which is a positive thing. And obviously, Gus Van Sant has continued to do well. Dustin Lance Black has continued to write scripts, and this was like, Oscar first time around. Apparently, there was a bathhouse scene that that was shot and then scrapped. And it does seem to me that it was that the parts that I love the opening, I love the ending. They're kind of looser, they're wilder. Mm-hmm. There is that documentary feel. And then the scenes that are like in Castro Camera are very, how would I say it? They're very carefully blocked.
Yeah.
And they don't have that fluidity. Like Diego Luna is he's like all over the map. Mm-hmm. And the rest of this, the backdrop is pretty static. And it's really tough because that time in San Francisco was wild. And we know that Harvey Milk was when he left the closet or the semi-closet in New York and came to California, he did have a wild time. And when he says in the movie to James Franco's character, okay, well, I guess no more bathhouses and no more drugs. Since we haven't seen it, we don't see that change. And, and yet I know it's, what would it have helped if there was an orgy scene? I don't know if that would have solved anything, if there was a taking acid scene. We've seen that plenty. I just feel a little bit like it does suffer from biopic syndrome at certain points.
Yeah. Well, speaking to that a little bit, actually, the way that the film tells the story of Harvey Milk's life, I do actually love how it's one of these cases of a biopic that only focuses on a certain period of time rather than just the cradle to grave thing, because, again, I talked a few episodes ago about this with Lincoln, where I could have easily seen them just trying to go back and see the early days of how Lincoln became the man he would become. And the same goes here, where we might see Harvey's life growing up and dealing with bullying and building up to this kind of leader we see. And I think the script is focused in that you don't really need some of that earlier stuff. And you see the man and his private life, just like even in the scene where he's flirting with Scott at the very beginning, the James Franco character, just like the kind of boldness he has, how charismatic and charming he is, just especially to like younger men for him, because it's interesting looking throughout the film and seeing how many of the activists and the people around Harvey are much younger, more idealistic, and then you kind of contrast that with someone like David Goodstein, who is the owner of The Advocate, who is older and he's a lot more cynical and almost like conservative in his approach, and telling Harvey that people aren't ready for gay candidates. So I think there's some really interesting, juicy stuff in there with like the character work that isn't too obvious, but shows a real generational divide even within the gay community.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting point. And I think that tension between the men who had come up closeted, basically, that San Francisco, that having achieved that kind of success that they have at The Advocate, took a lot of negotiating with San Francisco and the powers that be, which were inherently conservative.
Thank you for listening to this preview of On Second Thought, a bonus series from And the Runner-Up Is. If you liked what you heard and want to hear more, please go to patreon.com/andtherunnerup.is and become a patron. Only $3 a month will get you access to bonus episodes, a Slack channel, and early access to regular episodes. Thank you so much for your consideration.